At the will reading, my parents beamed as the attorney passed Vanessa a check for $10 million. Then they looked at me and said, "Go make your own way." I didn't shed a tear. I didn't even blink. I simply fixed my gaze on the gleaming conference table, pretending my heartbeat wasn't hammering in my ears. Then, everything changed. An elderly gentleman in a charcoal suit rose. "There is one additional document," he announced, producing a faded envelope bearing my grandfather's unmistakable script. My mother's smile vanished. My father's fingers jerked. Vanessa's eyes turned to slits. That envelope altered the course of everything. It was the spark of a hurricane that would rip apart every carefully woven deception they had created, and it began in a place I hadn't visited in more than a year. My grandfather's farm on the edge of Charleston, where the breeze once felt like shelter and now carried the burden of hidden truths. I hadn't returned to the farm since the spring before grandfather died. It was strange how a place so known could suddenly feel alien. The gravel crackled beneath my boots as I climbed out of the car, and the wind chimes on the veranda. Once the melody of lazy summer days and sweet tea steeping on the sill, now rang empty. Echoes of something gone. I paused before knocking. The white paint on the door was flaking, same as ever. The magnolia trees still leaned too far eastward, yet I didn't feel invited. When the door groaned open, I half expected emptiness. Instead, I heard, "So you finally decided to come back." My grandmother's voice was unchanged, sharp enough to slice crystal. Her arms were folded, her jaw set like granite. I stood rooted, searching her face for anything familiar. Warmth, relief, bewilderment. There was only ice. "Grandma, what is happening?" I asked, moving closer. "They told me you were too occupied, that you didn't wish to be disturbed, that you'd built a new life far away." Her tone wavered, then hardened again. "Your grandfather asked for you, Claire. Every single day while he lay dying, he called your name." My throat went dry. "That's not true. I tried to phone. I even drove here in March." "Vanessa was here," she cut in. "She said no one answered the door." Grandma's gaze narrowed. "We never left. We were always here." A long, aching silence stretched between us. Then she turned and vanished inside without another word. I followed, the air inside heavier, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. She returned carrying an old leather journal. "This is the number he kept dialing," she said, handing it over. I recognized his handwriting instantly, blocky, precise, with a slight tilt. But the digits scrawled there, not mine. "Grandma, this isn't my number, not even close. I've had the same one since university." She stared at the page, her brow creasing. "They told us you'd changed it, that you didn't want us tracking you down, that you were embarrassed by us." "No," I whispered, backing against the wall for balance. "They lied to you. They deliberately kept me away from you." Her hands shook. She sank into the faded floral armchair by the hearth as though her legs had surrendered. "They told me noon," I breathed. "I arrived at the church and it was deserted." She looked up, face ashen. "The service was at 9, she said softly. "They told everyone you couldn't be bothered to attend." My breath hitched. I would never have missed his funeral. Never. For a moment the room was still, too still. Then I felt the dam inside me crack, my chest constricted, my sight blurred. I dropped beside her, clutching her hand like a frightened child. "I didn't know," I murmured. "I didn't even know he was ill until it was too late." Her voice softened, her fingers brushing mine. "We know the truth now. That is what counts." We know. We remained there for a long while. The silence was not uneasy. It was dense with everything unspoken. The antique clock on the mantel ticked louder than memory served. Outside, the breeze rose, scattering dry leaves across the porch like restless ghosts. At last, Grandma rose. Her hands trembled faintly, but a spark burned behind her eyes that I hadn't seen in decades. "I'm making a call," she declared. "Calling whom?" She didn't answer immediately. She walked to the ancient rotary phone on the kitchen wall, the one grandfather had refused to modernize, and began dialing. Each click felt intentional, heavy, like the final punctuation of a letter long overdue. I watched her aged fingers, thinned but resolute. When the call connected, her voice turned glacial. "Betty, I need you, Jacob, and Vanessa here, immediately." A muffled protest leaked through the receiver, but she silenced it. "No, it cannot wait 1 hour." She hung up without farewell, then she turned to me. "The lawyer is coming too," I blinked. "Grandfather's lawyer?" She nodded. "Your grandfather left certain directives, but he insisted they be read only when everyone is present. So that is precisely what we will do." I said nothing. There was nothing to say. I simply nodded. For the next hour, I sat at the little kitchen table, tracing the grain of the wood with my fingertip. That same table where grandfather once sipped black coffee while poring over the journals I mailed from university. The place where he first asked about my degree in communications. The spot where I confessed I wanted to study plant memory, and he never once laughed. I glanced around the kitchen, same curtains, same hum of the ancient fridge. But the atmosphere had shifted. Footsteps sounded on the porch. The doorbell chimed. Grandma rested a hand on my shoulder. "Stay here, I'll fetch you when it's time." From the kitchen, I heard them arrive one by one, my mother's syrupy voice. "Oh goodness, it still smells exactly the same." My father's measured calm. "I thought all this had been settled." Vanessa's impatient exhale. "Seriously, this couldn't wait until probate is finished." Then silence. And Grandma's voice, colder than winter steel. "Please, sit. Mr. Harold Keene will be here shortly. He will read Walter's final instructions." I could picture their expressions, baffled, curious, mildly irritated. They had no idea I was present. They had no clue what was coming. Neither did I, but deep inside, I hoped someone would finally voice what I had always felt in my marrow, that what they had done was not love. Silence, exclusion, manipulation, these were not accidents. They were decisions. The front door creaked once more. A new voice, calm and professional, the lawyer. "This won't take long," he said, "but it must be done correctly." That was my signal. Grandma called, "Claire, come in now." I rose, my pulse raced. As I stepped through the doorway into the living room, three heads snapped toward me, eyes widening, faces crumbling simultaneously. My mother's smile froze mid-curve. My father's jaw clenched. Vanessa went white as paper. The air crackled like static. They weren't merely shocked to see me. They were afraid. All three simply stared. My mother blinked as if confronting a specter. My father tugged at his collar, an anxious habit I hadn't witnessed in years. Vanessa's lips parted, but no words emerged. She looked as though someone had torn the script from her grasp mid-scene. I held my spine straight. If they expected me to shrink, they would be sorely disappointed. Grandma motioned to an empty armchair opposite them. I lowered myself slowly, steadying my breathing. Mr. Keene offered me a brief, courteous nod, then opened his leather case and withdrew a thick manila envelope. "This," he began, "is the last will and testament of Walter R. Whitman, recorded and sealed according to his wishes. In addition to the formal documents, he included a handwritten letter to be read aloud." No one uttered a sound. He cleared his throat and continued. "To my wife, Margaret Whitman." Grandma didn't flinch. "I bequeath our family farm, the house, and sufficient funds for her comfort and care. She knows where to find the rest." He turned the page. "To my granddaughter, Claire Whitman." The room seemed to contract. I felt it. "I bequeath the Whitman Research Center located at 317 Laurel Creek Road, Charleston, including all laboratory equipment, endowment accounts, active patents, and intellectual property currently registered under Whitman Innovation." A sharp intake of breath, not mine. My mother's gaze darted to Vanessa. I kept my hands folded calmly. Mr. Keene went on. "And finally, the remainder of my estate, financial holdings, investments, and retirement accounts, shall be divided equally between my two granddaughters, Claire and Vanessa Whitman." There it was. A detonation, quiet and graceful, but the real blast followed instantly. Vanessa leapt up, her chair screeching across the floorboards. "What?" she spat. "He gave her the center, the entire facility," her voice fractured. "That's madness. She jabbed a finger at our parents, shaking. "You promised me everything. You said if I just kept coming, kept smiling, kept playing the perfect granddaughter, it would all be mine." My father pressed his lips into a thin line but said nothing. My mother stared at the rug as though it might swallow her. I remained still, watching the threads unravel. Mr. Keene lifted a calming hand. "There is more. Mr. Whitman also penned a personal letter to Claire, which he insisted be read aloud in this room before the entire family." Vanessa let out a bitter, humorless laugh, but no one echoed it. Grandma retrieved a folded sheet from the drawer beside her. "He wrote this the week before he passed," she said. "He made me swear." The lawyer unfolded it carefully, mindful of the creases. Grandfather's bold, assured handwriting filled the page. "To my dearest Claire," Mr. Keene began. "If this letter is being read, I am no longer beside you, yet my faith in you burns brighter than ever." The words struck me like sunlight through an open window. "You were always the quiet observer, the deep thinker, the one who asked, why, when others accepted the surface." Vanessa sank back into her seat. Mother twisted her fingers. Father gazed out the window. "You forged your own truth in a family that never learned to honor yours." Something inside me shifted, not fury, not vengeance. Simply acknowledgement. "You were never an error, you were the legacy of which I was proudest." Tears clouded my sight, but I refused to look away. I wanted them to hear every syllable, every single one. Mr. Keene's voice stayed even, though the weight of the words thickened the air. I watched you clutch that little notebook at age 7, timing how long it took raindrops to fill a jar. I saw your face ignite when you discovered patterns while others saw only distractions. My chest tightened. I still owned that notebook. He continued. I saw how your light dimmed when your mother dismissed you, how your father changed the subject whenever you shared something that thrilled you. Mother drew a sharp breath. I didn't glance her way. Vanessa was simpler for them, the letter read. She shone in ways they understood, but you, Claire, you radiated in ways they could not comprehend, and rather than learn your language, they closed the door. Vanessa shifted, arms locked across her chest. I do not entirely fault her. She performed the role they offered, but you authored your own character, and that, my girl, demands courage. A tear slipped down my cheek. I let it fall. I remember the day you won your first science fair and begged me to hide the trophy. You said, if I don't show it, maybe they'll stop treating me like I belong to someone else. A pained exhale escaped, perhaps my father's. You deserved celebration, Claire, not invisibility. Though I cannot undo the harm, I can give you a sanctuary that is wholly yours, a place to create without apology, without their shadows. Mr. Keene paused, refolding the letter with care. The silence that followed was not hollow. It brimmed with memory, bitterness, and something fresh, lucidity. I cleared my throat. I remember that science fair, I said quietly, slicing the tension. Mom didn't come. She was at Vanessa's dance rehearsal. Vanessa flinched. I came home clutching that trophy like it was shameful. My father finally spoke. Claire, this isn't the moment to dredge up old grievances. No, I replied, my voice sharpening. It's the only moment. Because all I ever heard from either of you was, why can't you be more like your sister? I turned to Vanessa. And from you, every time I dared to feel proud, you made it feel like a threat. She scoffed. Please. You always cast yourself as the victim. I earned what I got. I nodded. You mean you visited when it was convenient, smiled on cue, said the right lines because you thought there would be a payout? Vanessa's face hardened. And what, you think you're above it all? You vanished for years. No, I countered. I was erased. You told Grandma I wanted nothing to do with her. You gave Grandfather a false number and made certain his messages never reached me. That isn't distance, that is deletion. My mother rose abruptly. Enough, Claire, you're distorting everything. This family has suffered enough. This family, Grandma interrupted icily, has been living inside a lie. And I allowed it far too long. Mother whirled toward her, stunned. Mother, don't, Grandma warned. I watched all of you ignore Claire's pain. I believed you when you said she didn't care. I should have known better, my father squirmed. Look, Claire received her education, her summer programs, her trips abroad. That wasn't free, I said. No, I answered. But you didn't pay for any of it. Grandfather did. Every penny, the scholarships he found, the plane tickets, the subscriptions, you barely knew where I was half the time. My voice cracked. You made me feel like an obligation. He made me feel visible. Vanessa stood again. This is absurd. I was told everything would be mine. I was the one who stayed. I was the good granddaughter. No, I said calmly. You were the actress, the favorite. I was the secret, but Grandfather never forgot me. And now you no longer get to pretend I don't exist. Vanessa's features twisted. Why should you receive anything, just because you're the tragic little prodigy in a lab coat? I allowed myself a small smile. No, I received something because I earned his love honestly. And that is the one thing you never grasped. Love is not a transaction. Grandma rose. She moved to the center of the room, slow but unwavering. I regret that Walter left you anything at all, she said, staring straight at Vanessa. You may have played the part, but it was never love. It was barter, and I am ashamed I didn't see it sooner. She faced them all. Leave, you are no longer welcome here, my mother gasped. Mother, please, out, Grandma repeated. Now they hesitated. Then Vanessa snatched her handbag and stormed out, heels striking the floor like bullets. My parents trailed after her, dazed, muttering about lawsuits and appeals. For the first time in my life, they left empty-handed. The door shut behind them with a soft click. No slam, just finality. I stood motionless for a moment, uncertain what emotion to claim. The room was quiet now, not charged, not explosive, simply liberated. Grandma passed me and lowered herself onto the sofa. Her hands, which had shaken earlier, now lay steady in her lap. They'll try again, I whispered. They always do. Perhaps, she replied, but this time we are under no obligation to open the door. It took time for that truth to settle. For years I had lived by an unspoken pact. If I achieved enough, proved myself enough, remained useful enough, perhaps one day they would truly see me. Call me daughter, sister, family without hesitation. But standing in that room with grandfather's words still floating in the air, I understood something achingly clear. I had been trying to earn affection from people incapable of offering it. And grandfather, he had recognized that long before I did. "I need some air," I said. Grandma nodded and I stepped out onto the back veranda. The boards groaned beneath me, a sound that once meant home. Now it meant transformation. The magnolia blossoms still perfumed the far corner. Beyond the fence lay the same red clay field where grandfather had helped me build my first flimsy greenhouse. It collapsed after 14 days, yet he dubbed it a magnificent failure, and we laughed about it for years. I thought of that 10-year-old girl, knees caked in dirt, eyes alight, and wondered how long she had been buried beneath expectations that were never hers. When I returned inside, Grandma had set the kettle on the stove. She moved deliberately now, every motion purposeful. "You know," she said, "Walter began planning that research center 5 years ago, long before the illness." I stared, startled. "He told me he wanted you to have a space where you never needed permission to be entirely yourself." The tears came quietly, cleanly. No sobs, just release. That night I slept in my childhood room for the first time in years. The wallpaper had faded, the mattress sagged, but the ceiling still bore those glow-in-the-dark stars grandfather had helped me arrange into accurate constellations when I was 9. He never questioned the precision. Lying there, I realized the house no longer felt haunted. It felt reclaimed. The next morning I brewed coffee for us both and carried it to the kitchen table, the one I once avoided when my parents visited. Grandma folded her newspaper and offered a weary but genuine smile. "So what now?" she asked. "I think I go see it," I answered. "The center, the lab," she nodded. "He would want that." I looked out the window. Sunlight spilled gently across the magnolia branches. For the first time in years, I did not feel the need to flee, to prove, to justify. I did not feel unseen. And that, more than money, more than any bequest, was the truest gift this family had ever given me. The man who believed in me had left behind something greater than wealth. He left me permission to start anew. The first time I saw the center, it didn't resemble a laboratory. It looked like a restored barn, and that was precisely what it had been. Tucked at the end of a dusty lane off Laurel Creek, the structure boasted wide timber beams, a tin roof, and double doors that belonged on a stable, not a research institute. But inside was wonder. The interior had been completely transformed. Floor-to-ceiling glass lined the eastern wall, flooding the space with dawn light. Workbenches stood in neat rows, laden with pristine equipment, microscopes, spectrometers, tablets, a 3D printer still in its packaging. Shelves held sealed boxes labeled with my name. In the middle of the main room sat a broad bench. Atop it rested my childhood notebook, the one I thought lost forever. Torn pages, childish scrawl, tiny sketches of honeybee dance patterns. My legs nearly buckled. Grandfather hadn't merely built me a lab, he had built me a sanctuary for my mind. Over the following weeks, I moved into the center full-time. I brought on 2 graduate students, Tyra and Micah, old friends from my program who still believed science could remain human. We began modestly. A local grant for water-efficient irrigation, then a collaboration with nearby farmers to trial regenerative crop cycles. We made mistakes, destroyed equipment, wept over rejected proposals and corrupted data. Yet we kept returning. Every morning I unlocked doors to a place that never demanded I justify my existence. A place where intensity, silence, or brilliance were not flaws to apologize for. One afternoon, after a crushing funding denial, I sat alone on the floor surrounded by scattered printouts and cold coffee. I pulled grandfather's letter from my bag, unfolded it to the line.